Hello and welcome. This is Rooflemonger and my friends fighting games. They have plenty of crazy characters, from ever-changing pop idol magical characters, to Turkish oil wrestlers, to a tank with a literal skull on it. Suffice to say, there are many ridiculous characters in fighting games. And in today's installment of the Ridiculous Characters of Fighting Games history, we are going to be talking about the crack addict turned ninja president, Chipp Zanuff from Guilty Gear. So, Chipp Zanuff has had a trajectory like few other fighting game characters, starting out as a drug addict and is now the ninja president in an African country. Chipp has definitely risen above his station, I guess that's fair to say. So what is Chipp's deal exactly? Well, Chipp, he's a ninja. I guess that's easy enough to tell, right? And we'll get more to the hows and whys of Chipp when we get to the lore breakdown. But there are two things that Chipp loves. Chipp loves justice, and Chipp loves Japan. And no, Chipp is not Japanese, despite being a ninja. He's kind of one of those guys. I think you know what I mean, right? Loves Japan to an unreasonable amount. Pretends he's Japanese, although he's obviously not, because Japanese people in Guilty Gear are actually basically magical superheroes, which he is not. Says he's from Japan, that's kind of BS, and the worst part about his love of Japanese stuff is he actually barely knows anything about Japan, and actually most of the things he thinks he knows about Japan are actually just completely wrong, but regardless, he just loves Japan so much. That said, in the lore of Guilty Gear, he is one of the few, and I mean very few, key users that are not Japanese, so he does have that going for him, at least. And also, before he is joined by his secretary Answer, who we'll also go into, he is the last living practitioner of ninjutsu, and that does draw some eyes on him government-wise. Chipp is the kind of guy, in Dungeons & Dragons terms, high wisdom, low intelligence. He's got good instincts, but the thing is, overall he's kinda stupid and he doesn't always make the best decisions or usually use the best words when having discussions. That all said here, before we get to just the real meat of him, let's talk about how he traditionally plays in the games. So Chipp is a ninja, and like a ninja, he is wicked fast. In Guilty Gear, he is also the only character that can triple jump. Other characters can double jump, sure, but he gets to jump 3 times. He can also interact with the wall, and in fact, in the upcoming Guilty Gear Strive, he just straight up has a wall run. Like, he can climb up it here, but in Strive, he can just run right up it like it's not even an obstacle. However, for all this mobility, there is a price to be paid. Chipp basically takes more damage than everybody else. His effective health is very low. You cannot afford to take hits as Chipp. That said, hey, his offense is very high, so it sort of makes up for it. And he also has tons of tricks like invisibility, as you can see here, making it a lot harder to read, a lot harder to see. And when he's a lot harder to see and read, then the mix-ups, well, they get a lot more real. He even has stuff like teleports. Now, this depends game to game, right? I think in Strive he doesn't have as many teleport options, but maybe they'll come in time. He also has stuff like command grabs. Suffice to say, to make up for his lack of defense, he is an offensive dynamo. He has a million ways to rush you down and break through your guard. So for Chipp's lore, we're going to break it into 2 parts here. Chipp himself and the Eastern Chipp Kingdom, of which he is the president of. Now I know you're saying, wait, how is he the president of a kingdom? And don't worry, there's a very satisfying answer for that. So Chipp was born and raised in the good old US of A. The problem with that is, in the Guilty Gear universe, there was this thing called the Crusades where a lot of bad stuff happened, and a lot of countries kinda ate crap, USA just as much as anyone else, right? So in the lore of Guilty Gear, the United States is no longer a superpower and hasn't been for some time. Chipp grew up basically a street rat, a poor orphan, right? And in that time, you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. And, you know, thievery, all that kind of stuff, sure. And he kind of wound up being a drug addict. That's just how he managed to cope with life. And with that, he started running along with the mob. And with that, on top of being a drug addict, he eventually became a drug dealer. And, well, he basically became a drug dealer just to get more supply, right? And the old saying is, don't get high on your own supply. Chipp, he didn't really ascribe to that theory, and eventually he just came so broken down and worthless, the mob didn't want him anymore, and they basically had him marked for death. And in running from the mob, this is when Chipp runs into a gentleman named Tsuyoshi. Tsuyoshi took in Chipp when Chipp was at his lowest point, and he basically forced him to go clean, like completely cold turkey, and Chipp didn't deal well with that at points. Like, he attacked him at certain points because he wanted the drugs back, but after a while he got clean and he saw kind of where his life was going, at which point it was straighten up and fly right. And you know what, he totally dedicated himself to Tsuyoshi, and Tsuyoshi, wouldn't you know it, was a ninja from Japan. Tsuyoshi is the one that taught Chipp everything he knows about ninjutsu and basically made him the man that he is today. And of course, as it always goes in these kind of stories, so one day Chipp is out, and only to return to find out that Tsuyoshi has been killed by members of the Assassin's Guild. And at which point, of course, naturally, you gotta have the revenge plot, right? Now, actually, to Chipp's credit, he gets the realization that the whole revenge shtick is pretty hollow in the end, and he doesn't stick with it. He's not one of those guys who's all about revenge for the next 20 games in the series. So revenge, kinda stupid, gonna get over it, let's move on with my life. Now, don't get me wrong, he still kicks the crap out of the Assassin's Guild, right? Like, he doesn't just walk away from it, but once he does kick the crap out of the Assassin's Guild, well, you know, violence begets violence, all that kind of stuff. There's really only one way to change where things are going, and that's simply, well, I have to become the president myself. And from that point onwards, Chipp is dedicated to becoming the president. The president of what? Well, he didn't really think that far ahead, actually. But you know what? That's where we're going. So a big part of the X2 franchise, he spends learning just, you know, what is a president? That and being attacked by bounty hunters. But he's going around the world campaigning for votes, you know, kind of showing he doesn't really understand the process, right? He asks criminals for votes, which, you know, hey, they can't vote. He goes to every country in the world asking for votes, not really fully understanding he has to be in one specific country. But basically, it's just a giant whirlwind tour of discovery and self-improvement. That's the classiest way I could put it, because he's just a complete idiot and is absolutely, completely, fully, and utterly over his head in this situation. But you know what? There's the old saying, if there's a will, there's a way. And Chipp, maybe he ain't the brightest, but he certainly is stubborn. And maybe by the conclusion of the X2 series, nothing really happens. But between X2 and Exard, Chipp becomes the president of the Eastern Chipp Kingdom. And as you can see there, that is where all the business is done. Maybe it's not the highest rent accommodation, but it is his. Now, why is it the Eastern Chipp Kingdom? After all, isn't it a little weird to call it the Eastern Chipp Kingdom if you're a president? Well, the simple and satisfactory answer to that is, it just sounds better. Don't sweat the details, man. So what exactly is the Eastern Chipp Kingdom? Well, it is a state somewhere in southern Africa. As we went over earlier, in America, after the Crusades, America was definitely ruined and, you know, just took a bad beating. And that's the States, right? So countries with less infrastructure, less stuff going on, the Crusades just devastated them. So lots of parts of Africa were just completely lawless. And Chipp moved in, cleared out all the bandits, and basically set up shop. So the Eastern Chipp Kingdom is only like about 20-30,000 people strong, but he's doing his best as president. The Eastern Chipp Kingdom is run by Chipp's, basically his personality and proclivities, they rule the day. So one of the main things about the Eastern Chipp Kingdom, despite being an African country, is Japanese history is a big part of the curriculum, and it's taught as per how Chipp knows it, which is to say, incorrectly and wrong. So even though you have to learn Japanese, maybe you're not learning the correct version of it. And we also have Answer, who is Chipp's secretary slash bodyguard slash whatever you want to call it. He is the other ninja, and he runs a lot of the day-to-day stuff when Chipp is away, which is fairly often. Answer also has a lot to do with the Eastern Chipp Kingdom and how it's run, including a lot of suspect stuff. Not to say he's a bad guy, far from it, but just all in all, these are two guys that are definitely well in over their heads, and maybe the act of running a country just a little bit too much for them. Antisocial forces, hey, those don't help run a country, so we're gonna have a plan to eradicate all of them. We love Japan more than we know about Japan, so the staple foods of our African country have to be rice and sushi. And he has to beat up Jam how to figure out how to make it. Proper care and handling of endangered species? Well, gotta figure it out because I just captured a bunch of them for the hell of it. Hey, I love globalism, but people who play music in public, that is not gonna happen. Shanghai people into having them join your country just to give them an entertainment industry? Sure, why not? And just a lot of other stuff like, hey, don't worry about everything being made of wood, because if there's a fire, we'll just put it out. We have world-class medicine and doctors here, even though it's all just folk remedies, really. To disciplining and raising kids, quote-unquote, like Spartans. Suffice to say, the Eastern Chipp Kingdom is a land of contrasts. That all said, even though some of the policies in place are pretty weird, Chipp and Answer truly do want the best for the citizens in the end, and they're currently campaigning for the Eastern Chipp Kingdom to join the United Nations. Now, back to Chipp. The thing with Chipp and the greater story of Guilty Gear is Chipp's desire to participate in the greater plot and Chipp's ability to participate in the greater plot are two very different things, unfortunately. So Chipp is usually relegated to more of a comedy sideshow kind of deal. When it comes to the big movers and shakers of Guilty Gear, like your Kai Kisks and your Soul Bad Guys, Chipp sadly doesn't quite measure up. So everything from the original Guilty Gear up through X2 leading to Exard, that got him to the president of his own country. Awesome. But after Exard, well, he wants to prove his strength and prove the strength of his country, and he goes around trying to do that. One of the things is trying to take down Ramlethal, and he wants all the glory to himself, which doesn't really pan out, really. He is certainly strong, absolutely, but when it comes to the heaviest hitters in the franchise, tier-wise, power-wise, he does not quite actually match up to them. Hey, but there is some good guy stuff happening. He totally saves May. That's cool. She was gonna fall off a bridge, and then she didn't. And in the act of rescuing May, he helps to reunite her with Johnny. And when the time comes, of course, a bad guy by the name of Badman shows up to try to take May away, and Chipp, being the hero that he is, because he is a heroic guy, he does basically do the whole, you run, I'll buy time for you guys, even though he is critically mismatched and really out of his league. The fight goes about how you expect, but he did buy enough time for Johnny, May, and the crew to get away safely. And thankfully, there's always a little Deus Ex Machina going on. So yeah, Chipp may have lost, but did he really lose? Because turns out Zato is in the area anyways, and Zato kind of saves the day for Chipp, so you don't gotta worry too much. And in Exard, honestly, that's about Chipp's relevance. In Revelator, Chipp also, unfortunately, not a very big mover and shaker, but the one thing he has, once again, Chipp has really good instincts, right? Even if he isn't the smartest, but on his instincts, he is well ahead of the game when it comes to the whole universal will thing. In that he kind of sniffs out that the universal will is the Pope before anybody else. And he goes directly to Kai to let Kai know what's up, because everyone's trying to figure it out, but Chipp is a step ahead of everyone, even if they don't really want to believe what's directly in front of their face. Now, if you want to know more about what the Universal Will is, if that doesn't make much sense to you, please check the Ramlethal Ridiculous History video. That'll be linked at the end of this video because it's a lot to go over. but it is basically the driving force, the overall force really, of Guilty Gear Xrd and Guilty Gear Revelator. But in the end, even if Chipp doesn't have much directly to do with the crux and the finality of the plot, he does at least have the haha I told you so, because I know all this stuff before you guys figured it out. So I guess there's some last laugh stuff to it, if anything else. But in the end, even though he is not the big plot relevant character like some other ones, he does have one hell of a character arc. From crack addict to white ninja African president. Not many fighting games, even in the crazy world of fighting games, get to claim an arc anywhere as close as absurd as that. And of course, hey, that is not the end of Chipp Zanuff's story. Chipp will indeed return in the upcoming Guilty Gear Strive. Chipp's story in Strive will probably have more to do with the Eastern Chipp Kingdom and all of its trials and tribulations. Will he be a big mover and shaker this time around? Well, I guess only time will tell. This is supposed to be the big conclusion of the Guilty Gear story as we now know it. So hey, who knows? If there's ever a time to shine for Chipp, I guess now would be that time. Although honestly, I'd be just as down for an Eastern Chipp Kingdom management simulation myself. But that all said, that is the end of this video, and that is the ridiculous history of Chipp Zanuff. So if you could spare a like or a share, these kind of videos take a lot longer to make than the average video I make, so thank you very much for that. And otherwise, let me know what you thought about the video, let me know what other characters you would like to see, and that's the end of the vid. So hey, thank you very much for watching, hope this video has found you well, go out and play some Guilty Gear.
Make